Aloha and Bwebwenato, and I would also like to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you wherever you're joining us from across the Pacific Islands region as well as the globe. Welcome to today's EWC Insights webinar, where we have the privilege of having 4 speakers from the Pacific Islands and also from London who will be sharing with us their collaborative and outreach work at the International Maritime Organization. Today's theme is on collaboration and outreach of the Six-Pack at the International Maritime Organization. Six-Pack is an informal group of like-minded Pacific states on ambitious climate targets at the International Maritime Organization. For today's webinar, if you have any questions throughout the session, please note them down in the Q&A chat box. I would like now to ask John Taukabe, an East West graduate student, to do a cultural opening as well as introduce our 4 speakers for today. Thank you.
Greetings to everyone. Thank you very much for being here and activating this space. In the words of Father of the Pacific and a scholar, Epile Hauofa, he notes, it is the water that connects us, the people of the Pacific. We are the sea, we are the ocean, and Oceania is us. With that, I have the privilege of activating the VA in this space with a Rutuman poem that I wish to share with you all. This poem is on the importance of navigation and acknowledging our ancestors and their relationship with the seas, with their voyages, and with the land, with the elements, and with water. Usaneville se lalonga roni, hanua pera masosi. E ufa se ufanga, tonu cheru cheru mata. Monu hosene oe, mamaf. Hanua mapera kafkaf. Ton motit ne solo chiimia. Katpora lapa ne sasapwa. Inia ne tista tonu ang toma. La chi makikia se mua. Na ia mauri se kakoi ne hanua. Noho lele se tore ne ava. Tonu wak mauri a koi nang tutu. On es au pumo kati ofro. Tonu hak mamaan wut perpera. Kana furmaria se yo ni sunhunga. Lele la rente la navo hia. Maya foke tifakaniste. Tonu. Tonu mosi. E sosi mali ucharava. Kolua Pasifika mahanua helava. Te mamfua soia risvaka. E on tousa, e rere ni tonu, forou maosia koinanga. I ini ne sosi forma mou, ia, so'o, he'e, mauri, lele pau. Vaexia. It is also with a pleasure to introduce our panelists who will be joining us today. If you could please bear with me. Our first speaker today, connecting from Majuro in the Marshall Islands, is Atina Schutz. Atina is a legal and policy researcher with the Micronesian Center for Sustainable Transport, and through this capacity, she assists the Six-Pack. Atina will also be traveling to the International Maritime Organization meetings in London as an advisor on the Marshall Islands delegation to the 14th and 15th Intersessional Working Group on Greenhouse Gas Emission meetings and to the 80th session on the Maritime Protection Committee. Our next speaker, John Kautoke, connecting from London in the UK. John is a political and legal advisor at the High Commission of the Kingdom of Tonga in London. Recently, he has assisted the delegation of Tonga at ISWG GHG 13 and MEPC 79. And we'll do so again at the upcoming ISWG 14, 15, and MEPC 18. Our next speaker, connecting from Honiara in the Solomon Islands, Dr. Morgan Wairiu, is a natural resource and climate adaptation specialist. Dr. Wairiu is currently the chief of party of the USAID-funded Scale NRM project in the Solomon Islands, pro-chancellor and chairman of the Solomon Islands National University Council. Previously, he held the deputy director position of the Pacific Center for Environment and Sustainable Development at the University of the South Pacific. During his time at USP, he was coordinating lead author of the Small Islands chapter of the IPCC Working Group 2 Sixth Assessment Report. He has over 30 years of experience in agriculture, forestry, land use, and the environment, including climate change adaptation and risk resilience in the Pacific region. His research interest is in food security and climate change. Our final speaker, Dr. Transform Akorao, connecting from the Solomon Islands. Professor Transform Akorao is the Vice Chancellor of the Solomon Islands National University. He is concurrently legal advisor to the Marshall Islands Marine Resource Authority and CEO of iTuna Intel and Fisheries Research and Development Consultancy. He was legal advisor and acting deputy secretary to the Solomon Islands Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He served as assistant legal counsel, and deputy director of the Pacific Islands Forum Fisheries Agency in Honiara, Solomon Islands. He worked as international legal advisor to the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat in Suva, Fiji. He was pioneer CEO to the parties of the Nauru Agreement, the PNA, with his office in Majuro, Marshall Islands, and administrator of the PNA Persane and Longline Vessel Day Scheme. He has been involved in fisheries development and oceans management issues in the region since 1988. Professor Akorao has published widely on fisheries, politics, development, natural resources, and government issues in the Pacific region. He was a member of the World Bank Blue Ribbon Panel and board member of Saltai Fishing Company. He is a board member of the International Seafood Sustainability Foundation. He is also the author of Fishing for Success, Lessons for Pacific Regionalism, published by the ANU Department of Pacific Affairs in 2020. He holds a Bachelor of Laws degree from the University of Papua New Guinea, Masters of Laws degree from the University of British Columbia, Canada, and a PhD in law from the University of Wollongong, Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, I give you our panelists. Foexia. Over to you, Tammy.
Thank
My
you so
apologies,
much,
Tina.
John, for that beautiful cultural opening, as well as for introducing our panelists for this afternoon. I'd like to hand it over to Atina to start with our webinar today. Thank you.
Gomo Dada, Tammy, and thank you so much, John, for that beautiful cultural opening. I think you've really set the scene and the vibe for today. So my intervention will be very short, but I'd like to start off by first telling our audience for what is the six pack, how did it come to be? Well, six pack, or 6PAC, is actually a nickname which is given to the original collective of Pacific states that all gathered together at the call of then foreign minister of the Marshall Islands to call for the IMO member states to adopt targets that are aligned with 1.5 degrees. And this was at MEPC, this was at the 68th session of the Marine Environmental Protection Committee at the IMO. And this was also 6 months ahead of the Paris Agreement. So the story goes, the call was seen with skepticism, and they all decided, okay, let's just wait until we see what happens at Paris, later on in the year. And another significant thing about this particular meeting was that it was also the first time that senior Pacific diplomats were at the IMO. And this is interesting because our countries were largely represented by our registries. So this was all the way back in 2015. And since then, the Six-Pack Collective has maintained steady, persistent, and diplomatic presence at the greenhouse gas emissions negotiation in IMO. And another part of the strategy behind this was to call on the local and international academy to build a country-based research and engine in order to empower the next generation of negotiators. And the center that I work for, the Micronesian Center for Sustainable Transport that I assist with is a product of that call. And since then, the center has backstopped countries with cutting-edge international science and experts, and that has been a huge key to our success. Also, another interesting thing to note is that it's been about 7 years since that, and a lot of the events that have happened in the past 7 years make for interesting reading. So I highly encourage you to visit our website if you can. So as was alluded to earlier, the upcoming meetings at IMO will be happening next week, and I will be traveling there tomorrow. This is I'll be traveling as part of a team of young people who are mentored and guided by the center that I work for, and we'll be there to assist our country delegations and gain exposure to the I'm going to say this sometimes this challenging and sometimes even hostile world of negotiations, but it's all part of building up our capacity and resilience for the future. Also, another important thing I'd like to note is that the upcoming meeting in July, the 80th session of the Marine Environment Protection Committee, is going to be shipping's last chance to make sure that it adopts targets that are aligned with 1.5 degrees or aligned with Paris climate targets. The Pacific has done quite a lot. It's for our countries, what we've done in the years leading up to this moment is really pushing for a paradigm shift in how people view how people view shipping and how they view our participation in forums like these. Recently, we launched 4 different submissions. Marshall Islands, along with some of its neighbors, launched 4 different submissions, and they are looking at legal principles that should be reflected in IMO's revision, in IMO's climate strategy. How the levels of ambitions that are required, how to ensure that the transition to non-fossil fuels is equitable and doesn't prejudice or doesn't leave any state behind. And importantly, in the event that the IMO does adopt a market-based measure in order to assist with the transition, how to ensure that it's the revenues of that are spent equitably amongst states. So these are it doesn't seem like, I mean, it's actually quite a lot what we're trying to accomplish here. And the actions that we're trying to do is definitely going to be catalytic for the next generation and catalytic for climate action in general. And with that, I would like to hand it over to the next panelist, John.
Thank you, Atina. Thank you very much, John Taukave, for that amazing commencement to our session. Malolele to everyone. Big malo to the East-West Center for organizing this. And I'd also like to say a big malo to all those who participated in the organization. It's a pleasure for me to be here at this talanoa session. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of the esteemed doctors present here today, Dr. Transform, Dr. Morgan. Thank you for availing your time to be part of this talanoa. At this moment, I'd also like to acknowledge the memory of the late Dr. Siti Ven Halapua, who was a great advocate of the talanoa process. ofa ke ne toka e ofa mo melino e iki. As John Dalkave, I'm very kindly introduced. My name is John Kautoke, and I'm a political and legal advisor at the Tonga High Commission in London, otherwise known as the Embassy of Tonga. I've been working in this role for 2 years now, so I'm very fresh to international work in general. But I'm even newer to work with the six-pack. I've only just begun engaging with the six-pack last November. As some of you may know here, there are many challenges to working in a small island mission so far from the Pacific. The chief of these challenges is the lack of capacity and the available expertise to effectively engage at the international level negotiations in a meaningful way. Oftentimes, we are forced to wear many hats in our missions, responsibilities, and that makes us a jack of all trades, which can be difficult at times when you go into negotiations where you're required to be an expert in your area. At times, it's very challenging. Just to let you know, our embassy here in London covers the UK and the EU, together with all of the international organizations in that area. And considering there's only 2 of us that work here, it's very challenging and a very daunting challenge at that. So we really have to prioritize which organizations we engage with, and we welcome any opportunity for capacity building. And I think this is where the six-pack has its strength. So I've just said all of that to demonstrate just how much capacity building we desperately need at our missions in order to engage in a meaningful way on the international stage. And the six-pack has been very effective, in my opinion, in assisting us with our lack of capacity. So the advice and guidance provided by the experts involved in this collaboration has been of high quality and tailored to our capacity needs. Most recently, the six-pack experts assisted Tonga in the drafting of our national shipping emissions reduction strategy, which will be in its final formation in the coming weeks. Through the six-pack, I also had the opportunity to participate in an interventions drafting session where I learned how to draft interventions on the go. This is a much needed skill in the fast-paced nature of negotiations. The experts and professors involved in six-pack, they also do an excellent job in reducing the very technical aspects of the work into a more digestive form of information, which is very important for myself, who's not an expert in maritime affairs, and also for my government officials back in the capital. I've also had the opportunity to speak and represent our six-pack in a handful of events, which our members helped us to get involved in. These events allow us to lobby our ambitions ahead of the negotiations, also to gauge what other delegations will be their positions when going into the negotiations. The skills taught by the six-pack group, they involve a lot of things, namely report writing, interventions drafting, public speaking, advocacy, negotiating skills, amongst other things. And these are skills which are very valuable, particularly for young Pacific adults such as Atina, John Dalkave, and myself, since they're transferable skills. And in our region where we have such small populations, we need to be versatile. And these skills help to build a capacity to become effective part of our respective country's voice on the international stage. In terms of policy, the regular six-pack talanoa sessions every week has also been invaluable in coordinating our work at the IMO as a region. So these past and upcoming months are some of the most crucial moments in IMO's history, with the revision of its greenhouse gas strategy. And this coordination that we have every week, it gives our region a tremendous advantage. So throughout the last intersession MEPC, our delegations consistently and jointly pushed for ambitious action in the revision of the greenhouse gas strategy. And I noted that many delegations at the intersessional working groups and MEPCs commented on how coordinated we were as a region, and our message was clear to all members then. We highly value the work provided by our current six-pack experts and participants, but we need more hands if we are to secure an equitable future and equitable transition within the international maritime sector. So we encourage our Pacific academic and professional experts to join in our collaborations, since they do not only have the experience and know-how, but they also understand the nuances and sensitivities of our Pacific region. I really highly commend the work of the six-pack to all here, and we from Tonga see it as an effective model which can be applied to other international fora. Thank you for listening to Wafatu. Malau Pito, and I would like to now hand it on to the esteemed Dr. Morgan for his intervention. Malo.
Thank you, John, for handing over the baton, and I'll carry it for the next 5 minutes. First and foremost, let me thank IMIO Center for hosting this talanoa. It's been good to be engaged in this whole issue and the talanoa that is happening now after almost a decade ago when we started off at the University of the South Pacific in 2012. So it's very encouraging to see the race is still on, and we are on the road to achieve what we want, to save the Pacific Islands. And also let me acknowledge and recognize and appreciate as well the submission done by the six-pack countries. The leadership from those countries should be appreciated for taking on that initiative, and also the support that is provided to the countries by a small team of technical people that are working behind the ground. As I mentioned, this issue was first discussed in a talanoa at USP in 2012. And, it's good to see that IMIO Center stepping into this space to support this whole process. At USP at that time, there was support for this whole initiative, looking at supporting countries to call for decarbonization and reduction in emissions from the international maritime shipping industry. And it's been going for some time now, and we need that support from all other research institutes and institutes of education around in the region to join in that partnership, to continue to support our countries, because this is very, very much similar to the leadership that has shown in the negotiations before the Paris Agreement for the 1.5 degrees Celsius. The Pacific has demonstrated strong leadership in order to reach 1.5 at the Paris Agreement, and we need that level of support and leadership from the Pacific to ensure that what we want out of the shipping industry in terms of emission reductions is achieved. But that will not come very cheaply, and it will require a lot of effort, and there may be a lot of challenges ahead of us. But I see that going together into partnership with the regional universities, as well as the national universities, as well as other research institutes, that we can all put our hands together to support the leadership from our countries in terms of our strive to reduce emissions through the International Maritime Organization. As I mentioned, when USP started this whole process of sustainable sea transport and going into the MOU, seeking reduction, all that, there were not very many countries who were engaged, but it's also encouraging now to see countries, especially now we have 6 countries at the forefront with this submission to the IMO, so that we can call for that reduction in emissions. Now, from a National Institute perspective, I myself here, as well as my Vice Chancellor, Dr. Transform, who will be speaking after me, we recognize the importance of research and education, as well as capacity building to support this whole process. And we are already discussing some ways and also forging some partnerships to set up some initiatives within the university itself to support this process, especially support domestically as well as internationally. We understand that Solomon Islands as a government is also part of the six-pack, and we would like to support Solomon Islands as well as other regional countries from a research and technical training component as part of the process. So that's what we are committed to doing. And when I asked my Vice Chancellor, Dr. Transform, to talk more on this particular issue, he will be providing some of those insights as to what we are planning to do at the university. But also, I will also encourage other national universities like the Fiji National University, as well as others in the region, including USP, which started this off, to all partner together. And it's very encouraging to see East-West Center. And also, if the University of Hawaii can join forces with all the other regional institutes to provide the technical support that is required for supporting our countries to negotiate this pathway through the IMO. And because this will result in drastic reduction from the shipping industry in terms of emissions, and also contribute to achieving the 1.5 degrees Celsius that most leaders in the Pacific Island countries have argued for during the Paris Agreement. So I see this as an important platform that we can build on, strengthen, as well as collaborate and partner to achieve what we want to achieve to save our Pacific Island countries. And with that, I'm happy to hand over to Professor Transfer Mangorau to speak more on behalf of the Solomon Islands National University.
Good morning. Aloha to everyone. Good morning from Honiara, Solomon Islands. Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this important talanoa. My own journey in this respect has been both be a participant in some of the conversations that we've had last year in the development of this process, but also more recently as the Vice Chancellor of the university, I recognize the importance of developing close collaboration with the industry. So we have at the university two platforms in which we're trying to engage in this respect. First, we set up an Institute of Oceans, Islands and Sustainable Development, in which we try to work together with other universities and collaborate with them, particularly looking at climate change impacts on communities and also on the country and developing policies. But more closely to this particular subject is our collaboration through the Maritime Academy we have with the Solomon Islands Maritime Authority. And I've had conversations with the Solomon Islands Maritime Authority, and I know that part of the collaboration that they're having in this endeavor is to have someone from the IMO, International Maritime Organization, actually based here in Honiara for us to be able to work closely with them. I had a meeting last week with the staff and the students of the Maritime Academy. And one of the things that we did mention to them is the need for us to work closely with the shipping industry, not just the local shipping industry, but also we're looking at increasing our collaboration with some of the international shipping lines that come through to Honiara, so that we are able to impose and improve some of the management and look at our carbon footprints and some of the things that we're trying to work with the industry as a university, do the research that they need to support, and then look also at some of the economic impacts that they have, noting that the industry, the shipping industry here is small. So, you know, if we're going to impose measures that are addressing their carbon footprint, there will be economic costs, and that is the role that I see for the universities to play in helping to shape the development of measures, and also to shape the shape the progress that we want to make in this endeavor. One of the things that we recognize as an institution working with the Solomon Islands Maritime Authority and the shipping industry is that the future of the shipping industry is going to be in clean energy. And that is the message that the CEO of the Maritime Authority has already spoken to our shipping industry about. And that's something that we as a university have asked to collaborate, not just with the Maritime Authority, but we recognize that in order for us to achieve the efficacy, the effectiveness of what we're trying to drive at, we need to also work with the government ministry that's responsible for transportation. That's the Ministry of Infrastructure Development, and also some of the shipping industry, but also the shipping lines as well. And we are in the process of engaging with all these different stakeholders so that we can actually have support the Maritime Authority, which is the driver within Solomon Islands of this initiative. We want to be able to support them by bringing the different stakeholders together. Now, we also recognize that we cannot do that on our own as an institution. We do recognize that there is we need to partner and develop strategic partnerships with other research institutions around the region, but also around the globe. And we do recognize that it is not something that we as an institution can do alone. And I think the governments here also recognize that as well. And so it's this collaborative effort that is important, because one of the issues that I do know is that this is not something that we actually have control, the full control over. Not like and I always make I'm making the comparison with the tuna industry, where you can leverage access to your exclusive economic zone, to some of the conservation management measures. We need to negotiate very carefully at the international level. We need to be able to socialize some of these ideas and be able to sell some of those ideas. And our capacity to be able to leverage is not as strong as we do with tuna, for example. So that's a challenge that we have, and therefore we need to be innovative, and it's our responsibility as institutions to explore innovative approaches to how we can actually leverage the measures that we're trying to make and impose, and eventually have a clean transport, shipping industry, both domestic shipping industry, but also an international shipping industry that passes through our region, so that we actually can have a good story, a good carbon footprint, to be able to demonstrate to the world that we are actually trying to do something, even though we might not have the resources, even though we might not be responsible for the pollution that's going on, that's causing the impacts on climate change. But there is an effort that we are making to demonstrate that we want to be able to contribute. And so I think that is the challenge that we face as part of the 6 grouping of countries, that our effectiveness is going to it's impacted by our ability to leverage, and therefore we need to be smart, we need to be innovative. And I see us working with institutions like ourselves who also need support. But we do have the time, and we can probably be able to link with others who might have a lot more experience than ourselves to be able to develop those things. So with those few thoughts, I think we're ready for Q&A now. So thank you very much to my fellow panelists, and thank you for the contributions that you have made. And it's lovely to meet you online. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Transform, for sharing your thoughts on the work of SIXPAC at the International Maritime Organization. And many thanks to John, Atina, Dr. Morgan as well for sharing your insights as well as experience, and also the call for support in terms of the work that you're currently doing. I think for many of us, including me and many in the audience, this is the first time we're actually hearing about SIXPAC. And the work that you're doing at the International Maritime Organization, even though this initiative has been ongoing for, if I'm correct, 8 years. So if anybody in the audience has any question with regards to our presentation this afternoon, please feel free to list your question down in the Q&A chat box. We do have one question, and I'll just open it to the four panelists and see who answers the question. And so feel free to just jump in to add on to your other fellow panelists as well. So the work of the six-pack is focused a lot on, shipping industry, or perhaps like, working towards sustainable green shipping footprint in the Pacific Islands region. Can you talk a little bit more on how shipping industries are contributing towards our global greenhouse gases, and why the urgent need to shift towards a clean or more sustainable shipping footprints, particularly for our specific island countries?
Oh, do I raise my hand or can I?
So the question is just presented to the panelists, so any of you can jump in to answer that question.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on this one. So the question was, how does shipping contribute to greenhouse gas emissions globally? Well, currently it sits at around 3% of global emissions. If it were a country, it would be around roughly the same size as the emissions of Germany. Shipping is particularly polluting because it's powered by heavy fuel oil, it's powered by heavy fuel oil because that's the most economic option available for shipping. That being said, transitioning to cleaner fuels is expensive, a highly technical process, and unfortunately, a lot of the things being said about it now is that it's just not available up to scale, or it's not very commercially viable at the moment. And so we're in a situation where we need to transition, but the technology is just not available, is just not there, or there's a lack of political will. So one of the submissions, well, one of the initiatives that was put forward by Marshall Islands and the Solomon Islands was a levy, and that levy would obviously, a levy would try to lower the price differential. At the same time, subsidize research and development and deployment of newer fuels. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. And if all the panelists would like to come in, yeah, please do so.
Does any of the panelists like to add to that?
Yeah, thanks, Tammy. Yeah, just to add to that, in terms of the emissions from the shipping industry, the 3% that Anita mentioned, that is coming from the shipping within the IMO space, is actually not covered under the Paris Agreement. So we can do a lot in terms of getting the IMO come up with a mandate to ensure that all the shipping industries reduce their emissions, and that will contribute to achieving the 1.5 degrees as part of the Paris Agreement. So that's why it's important that the Pacific Island countries put together joint efforts to ensure that we also cap the 3% of the emissions coming from the shipping industry.
Thank you, Atina and Dr. Morgan, for your response to that question. I have another question from the audience. A lot of our panelists today, in your presentation, you mentioned a lot about the need for capacity building, particularly for international negotiations, as well as speed writing, practical boat operations and designs. How do you think academic institutions can best work together to make this whole suite of training needed?
Maybe I'll respond to that as the head of an academic institution. I think we do have a responsibility to collaborate with others. There's networks already in place between some of the Pacific Island universities called the Pacific Island Universities Research Network. So there is that possibility of sharing that information and the work that researchers are doing. There's also, of course, an opportunity for universities to work together in the development of programs and courses. But I think what is needed at this point in time is some of the analytical work that needs to go in to look at the cost and the impacts and the economic impact. So there's modelings that can be done to assist the countries in the development of their policy options. That's what I would see in terms of where we are in our effort at the moment, because from what I understand also is that, you know, this institution that we have set up does not actually have its own secretariat yet, and we have been trying to develop its own secretariat, and I think if it does have its own secretariat, it might be able to liaise more closely with some of the academic institutions in the regions who might be able to do the support work, the analytical work that's needed, develop some of the courses and programs, and do and support some of the analysis, you know, in the negotiations and all that, which actually can be done through collaboration with other universities and also with our governments. So for us at the Solomon Islands National University, I'm trying to work more closely with the Solomon Islands Maritime Authority and also with the government, because they have people who are actually attend some of the IMO meetings as part of this endeavor. Is a staff that's doing his master's in Sweden at the moment. This is all part of this particular endeavor, that the contribution that the Solomon Islands is making. And I've had meetings with the CEO and also our Maritime Academy for us to be able to bring ourselves closer together. And hopefully in that process, we can also bring USP, bring other universities together in this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Transform, for that. Really appreciate more insights into the work that you all are doing as part of SIXPAC. Now, we heard that SIXPAC from the webinar today, that it's a collective effort of ambitious, like-minded Pacific Island states. So one of the questions seeks to ask, does CPAC have a national strategy or an overarching policy, particularly for Pacific Island countries, to rally support towards the vision and mission of SIXPAC, both regionally as well as internationally?
Maybe I don't know if no one else wants to contribute. I'll contribute to this because I've been part of a process that's looking at getting World Bank, not just World Bank support, but setting up a secretariat for the SIXPACs within the region. And I think one of the issues that the objective of SIXPAC is clear. We want to be able to have a shipping industry and support the shipping industry to be able to reduce their carbon footprints in the region. It's largely targeted at the moment at the domestic shipping industry. And as I said, it is a small component of the actual shipping industry and the challenge that we face in the Pacific. So we are addressing a component of the fishery, not the fishery, but of the industry that would probably bear, for me, a disproportionate cost of what we're trying to do when others who are using our oceans and passing through are not being targeted, which is why the effort that we're making at the IMO and trying to get the change that we need for the international community to be able to apply these standards done at the IMO level. At the Pacific Island level, where we are right now, we have not yet, as far as I know and understand, been able to agree on what the structure of an institution, organization would look like. There's been conversation. I've seen some drafts that have been floated around, but we have not actually finalized things yet in terms of also these proposals for for going to the World Bank and others to help fund this new institution that we need to be able to drive and coordinate these efforts at the regional level. And yeah, I've been part of that conversation. And at this point in time, I don't know where that particular conversation is, where it rests, but I think it needs to be picked up and developed. Noting, of course, that we do have quite a number of regional organizations already in place. And so that's the other issue that I feel we need to be mindful of about how we set up our institutions and regional organizations, because I'm quite familiar with regional organizations. I'm also familiar with how regional organizations get funded. So funding is a critical component of the work that we want to be able to do in this space. And so I think the conversation is still there, and there might be some people who are listening in and participating in this webinar who have been part of this effort that we've been making, and it's an effort that I have been participating in, not as the Vice Chancellor of the university, but in my capacity as Atina Intel, just to share that experience in setting up regional institutions. But in terms of the specific question, I think the objective is fairly clear. We want to be able to have a good, clean shipping industry in the region.
Thank you so much, Dr. Morgan, and even Atina. Would you both like to add to what Dr. Transform has just shared with us?
Sure. Yeah, so regarding national strategies, the thing about Six-Pack is the philosophy behind it is that initiatives are country-led and built on what a country actually needs domestically. So an example for RMI, for our national shipping strategy, we recently launched the Rebelib 2050. So Rebelib is practically our transportation roadmap for our country. And my colleague John Kaldoke also mentioned Tonga also recently is in the middle of drafting their transportation or maritime emissions reduction strategy. So from my understanding of the question, it's like asking what is the overarching Six-Pack strategy. It's really up to the individual countries how they do it, how they want to reduce their emissions, and Six-Pack is there to sort of, and the experts behind Six-Pack as well, they're sort of there to assist them in that while looking at their various country priorities. That being said, I also like to bring up the value of country-led regional partnerships that Dr. Transform alluded to. And there's a lot of work that also needs to be done in that space as well. And I also want to mention that I agree on the need for funding and on the need for partnerships in that area. Thanks.
Thank you, Atina. Dr. Morgan.
Yeah, thank you, Tommy. Just picking up on what Transform and Atina has just mentioned with regard to national strategies and policies. Yeah. Maybe the Six-Pack may not have a common national strategy as yet, but as Atina said, most of the countries in the Pacific have their own national policies and strategies. And if you read across all those strategies and policies, the common position of all the countries is capping global average temperature to 1.5 degrees and below. And the submission that has been made to the IMO is actually aligned to that common position by Pacific Island countries. It's about keeping the global average temperature to 1.5 degrees, which is the Paris Agreement. So, but as I mentioned earlier on, the 3% emission from the shipping industries are not covered under the Paris Agreement because they are related to bunker fuels, and the burning of bunker fuels is a trans boundary issue that no one country can take responsibility for, and therefore that's why it's part of the IMO, and it will be good for what we are seeing now, that Pacific Island countries come together in a collective effort to address that. IMO. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to add on to that, I know that you mentioned that you have a delegation, or I think all of you are traveling to London this year to attend an IMO meeting. So what are some of the main priorities for the IMO MEPC 80 meeting in July that's happening this year? And perhaps particularly in relation to your role and your work in Six-Pack. Maybe I'll ask John Kautoke. Would you like to comment or provide a response on that?
I can try. I won't promise anything. I can try. So, is this in terms of the Six-Pack's priorities, or is it just in general?
I think
I'm
the
not too sure.
question is what are some of the main priorities for the IMO MECPC, the meeting that's the upcoming meeting in July in London? What are some of the priorities that they have, and you as a delegation going there? And so kind of you can talk about some of the main priorities that perhaps they have presented for this meeting, and how you're bringing also your priorities in line with that.
Okay, so I think by MEPC 80, I think the negotiations now are going into phase 2, I think. Atina can answer this better than I have, because I've not been following it too closely, and I've actually started to looking at the process right now. But yeah, I don't think the revision of the strategy will be finalized by MEPC 80 at least. I think it'll be probably be next year, but the negotiations are ongoing. I'll let Atina answer if she has any updates, but I'm not too sure. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Atina, would you like to comment on that, please?
Can you hear me? I had to switch devices, but great. Right. So yeah, John mentioned the revision of the strategy. It's it's aiming to be revised and adopted by MEPC 80. And as some of the people listening will probably know, because they've been engaged with us on this debate for quite a long time, so I'm sure they have a rough idea of what we're going for. But clearly, we want the strategy to reflect, clear 1.5 degree targets, no net zeros. We'd like an equitable transition to be fully enshrined in there. And we also like the revised strategy to reflect certain principles like polluter pays and equity and all those. So yeah, I mean, we're going towards MEPC with a clear set of requests. No, they're not requests, they're needs. So yes, I hope more and more countries take that into account. Thanks.
Thank you, Atina. Just to build on that, and also the ambition that Six-Pack has in terms of, pursuing a more sustainable but also green shipping footprint in the region. Recently, shipping charges have increased drastically, particularly after COVID. And so what was the reason, and how will it get normalized if we're talking about sustainability in the shipping industry? I'll ask any of you to respond to that if you can.
Yeah, Tommy, if I can just chip in for this particular question, because I haven't been engaged in the IMO process for some time now, but I understand the submission that the Six-Pack is, submitting to the IMO for the revised strategy. In that revised strategy of the IMO, there's always talk about just transition as well as equity. Those are the principles that guide the transition. So any increase in fees or in shipping charges and all that will have to be factored in the negotiation, so that no one state lose out and the companies are not disadvantaged as well. So those are the principles that are embedded in the negotiations of the strategy to reduce emissions under the IMO.
Thank you, Dr. Morgan. Any of the panelists would like to add to that before I move on to the next question? Okay, there's a question from our audience. Could you please explain the full name of six-pack and what it constitutes?
Sure, I can answer this one. So as I mentioned in my intervention earlier, six-pack is just a nickname given to this collective of countries that are like-minded when it comes to climate targets to be I would say pushed by the International Maritime Organization. So six is just the fact that they're like roughly six. There are six of us, and pack is, well, pack for Pacific. So it's really simple like that.
And thank you. And is it open to say like which particular Pacific Island countries are part of this initiative?
Yeah, so six-pack currently consists of RMI Solomons, Tonga, Fiji, Kiribati, and Tuvalu. Yeah, that's pretty much, and as you mentioned in the beginning, Tammy, it's like this informal group of countries that are, aiming for the same climate ambition in IMO. So yeah, that's us.
Thank you so much. There's another question, and it's from one of our attendees who lives in Tahiti, French Polynesia. They do hold a wind propulsion project and would like to participate and support six-pack. How can they join your initiative and support the work that you currently do?
Well, that initiative, like wind propulsion, is definitely one of the interests of the Micronesian Center for Sustainable Transport. So I would suggest you sending us a message, or yeah, you could visit our website. I'll drop it in the chat to make it easier access for everybody. But yeah, we'd love to hear from you, to the person who asked that question.
Thank you, Atina. And perhaps the last question, how can institutions like East-West Center, universities, and like tertiary institutions can work together to support you, either through capacity building, either through education or research? And I know this is the first time that a lot of us are hearing about six-pack and the work that you're currently doing at the International Maritime Organizations. And many of us would like to also contribute and support this initiative, but we don't know where to start and how. So how can we support this work that you're currently doing as part of institutions like East-West Center, the universities as well? And I think Dr. Transform did touch upon this earlier on in his talk, but just to let us know that, okay, this is how you can support and in what ways.
Pula Temi, if I could contribute to that question.
Absolutely, John.
You mentioned on like collaborations with universities and institutions and how people could get involved in that. Like Transform mentioned most of that, which is, collaborating with other universities in the region, which is good because you're reaching out to the next generation of, the next generation of diplomats, and that's going to be an important strategy, moving towards the future. I also believe, like, from my own experiences here, relationships with the East-West Center and the University of Hawaii have created a space in creating, research capacities and education-based programs that can enable students to be involved in work with the IMO. But I also wanted to acknowledge, our mentors within Sixpack as well. Dr. Peter Natal, and you have Dr. Alison Newell, and Ambassador Alban Ishoda as well, how they have been role models for young people, going into the field and learning the ins and outs of what the whole diplomatic process could be at the IMO. And that's one thing that I've been really appreciative of. And, being exposed to that line of work firsthand and learning from these mentors, and working as well with universities here in the University of Hawaii, and creating this link, because this talanoa session could be the start of a great relationship with East West Center and the University of Hawaii in getting students involved, not only from Hawaii but from the Pacific region as well, getting involved in that space with the IMO and engaging in those talks and the work. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, John Taukabe. And I know that we've reached our time, but I would like to say thank you so much to our speakers. Thank you, Dr. Transform, Dr. Morgan. Thank you, Atina, as well as John Kautoke and John Taukabe for sharing your experience and the work that you're currently doing with us. And I would also like to thank our audience who have joined us today as well. Mahalo nui and have a wonderful day.